Well, social engineers are at it again, trying to change how we speak to each other. Quality advocates want a language overhaul as part of an update to what they say are out-of-date anti-discrimination laws in New South Wales. Now, part of the language they want to change includes saying sibling instead of brother and sister, and you've got to say different sex. You're not allowed to say opposite sex. Stephen, this attack on language, is it really about inclusion, or is there something else going on here?
Yeah, well, the progressive left behind this, they know very well that the way we think is to a large extent determined by our words and our language. And if they can control the language that we hear, if they can control the words that we hear, the language that we speak, then indirectly over time they know that they can control people's thoughts. And what this is ultimately about is controlling people's thoughts through controlling the language. They say things like, oh, we've got to get with the times, but really they're trying to drag the times over to where they are, and the only way they can do it is with propaganda and state coercion, and this is just a perfect instance of it.
Well, Evelyn, let me go to you. News from America, where USA Boxing have just announced that men identifying as women will be allowed to fight in a female category, provided they've had a sex change and maintain low testosterone levels. Now, Australian boxer Ebony Bridges has slammed the decision on Twitter, writing, "This is wrong on so many levels. I will never agree to this. It's bad enough having trans women breaking records in other sports like track and field, swimming and powerlifting, but it's a bit different to them breaking our skulls in combat sport where the aim is to hurt you." Evelyn, would you want one of your female friends or family members paired in the ring against a transgendered boxer?
Look, I don't know about you, James, but I'm old enough to remember a time when violence against women was frowned upon, not something we would search to find loopholes in or technicalities to get around. I mean, we've already seen overseas the repercussions of biological men versus women in violent sports, such as skulls being completely fractured. It is appalling and it has to stop. And unfortunately, the only way it will end is if women just refuse to compete against biological men. I mean, sure, it might cost them a few medals in the short term, but in the long run, it's going to ensure that every gold medal in the future is given to a woman. And I mean, it's one thing having to put up with pronouns and walking on eggshells, but I actually think the sports movement is going to be the transgender movement's undoing, because people might tolerate the eggshell walking and the pronouns, but what they're not going to tolerate is seeing their daughters and their sisters getting beaten up by blokes in the ring. The average Australian and the average person won't put up with it.
I read this bit of news and I thought, is it going to take a woman being killed to finally end this transgender madness? Anyway, let's go to other news. It may be the start of a new year, but many of the same debates rage, with as many as 80 councils across Australia dumping citizenship ceremonies on January 26. Now, you'd think that receiving your Australian citizenship on Australia Day would be a great honour, but a growing number of councils are refusing to hold events this year, thanks to the Albanese government, which revoked a rule that effectively forced local councils to hold ceremonies on Australia Day. Stephen, how do you think new citizens will feel about being unable to receive their citizenship on Australia Day because woke councils say, oh, we don't want to upset Indigenous people?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to necessarily speak for all sort of new immigrants, new citizens, but what I will say is that these local councils need to remember that these people are becoming citizens of Australia, not citizens of the Sydney Council, not citizens of the Melbourne Council, but citizens of Australia, and there is no mandate from Australians to change that date. And so they're arrogating a right to do something that they have no right to do. These are people who are becoming citizens of Australia, and that particular ceremony should reflect the national law and the sort of the national feel that the 26th of January is the day of celebration, the day to do such things.
Yeah, very good point, Stephen. Evelyn, Sydney Lord Mayor Clover Moore, she says that the 26th of January is a painful day, it's distressing. For Indigenous people, it's a hurtful day. But at the same time, Sydney Council put on a whole host of Australia Day activities. So it's kind of hypocritical, isn't it? If it's a painful, terrible day, then scrap everything, surely.
Yeah, it's up there with every other Invasion Day politician who complains about colonisation, all whilst pocketing the king's currency. You'd think for such moral advocates, these sorts of people wouldn't want to participate in receiving dirty money. But, you know, consistency isn't something we have come to expect from these sorts. There are many days on the Australian calendar that are dedicated to Indigenous Australians. I mean, I can't even count how many, but I can count the ones that are purely dedicated for all Australians on 2 fingers, and they are not happy with those. And, you know, we're being told that there's issues with them. It's not so much a concern for Indigenous Australians as much as it is a hatred for the white man. And we have seen it time and time again, and we need to start electing politicians who love Australia, not just minority groups, but the whole of Australia, and not those who are going to apologise for who we are and what our grandparents built so that we can all live freely and prosper here in our nation, unlike many nations across the globe who unfortunately don't get to live as privileged as we do.
Well, here we are on January the 1st. I suspect we'll be having this debate for the next 4 weeks. Well, thank you, Evelyn. Thank you, Stephen.